We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki and Bev Turner. We're on your TV, radio and online, and we're here with you until midday again with the show. Plus today's biggest stories, lots of discussion, expert guests and our opinions, as well as yours.
That's right, it's very hot outside, so just stay indoors, watch us, get us on your radio, sit with the air conditioning on. Make sure you get in touch with your views as usual on gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to those as we go throughout the show. But first of all, here are the very important news headlines.
Very good morning. It's just 1 minute past 10. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Now, there are 11 candidates currently in the running for the new leader of the Conservative Party. Liz Truss has become the latest senior cabinet minister to add her name to the growing list of contenders. The Foreign Secretary is pledging lower taxes and says she wants to get a firm grip on spending. Other contenders include the former Health Secretary Sajid Javid and Jeremy Hunt, the ex-Chancellor Rishi Sunak, his successor Nadhim Zahawi, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps and the Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt. Well, Conservative MP Robert Jenrick told GB News he's backing Rishi Sunak.
Personally, I think it's best to focus on what that individual can really offer the country. And as I say, I think Rishi is the person of the greatest ability. He's an incredible hard worker. He's someone who has achieved enormous things already for the country. Front and centre will be the economy, and so choose the most economically literate person and the person that the public trust the most to deliver for them.
A timetable for the contest is expected to be drawn up this week once the new 1922 executive has been voted in today. The influential group of backbenchers will then finalise the rules of the leadership contest. They're meeting today to discuss changes that could limit the number of candidates. They're also looking at rules governing a no-confidence vote. Now, a no-confidence vote is something the Labour Party is pushing for in order to immediately remove Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer is going to announce that Labour will fight the next election on growing the economy. In a speech he's going to give this morning in the North East, he'll pledge to promise a fresh start for Britain. The Labour leader plans to hit out at what he calls the hypocrisy of those who served in Boris Johnson's government, saying they supported tax hikes despite being opposed to them all along. Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Jonathan Ashworth, told us a Labour Party is the only way forward to help end the cost of living crisis.
We can grow our economy, we could spread wealth and raise living standards sustainably while maintaining a stability in the cost of living with our growth plan. That contrasts with what Conservative candidates are promising, which would embed inflation and would see cuts to services. So there is a better way. I want your viewers to feel optimistic, because I'm optimistic that we don't have to do things the way we've been doing. We can do it in a better way for the future of this country.
Some international news. The president of Sri Lanka is going to resign after protesters stormed the capital over the weekend, demanding political reform. Tens of thousands of protesters bombarded the official homes of both the president and the prime minister in Colombo on Saturday in the wake of the economic crisis in the country. The prime minister's office says the president would step down on Wednesday, with the prime minister adding he'd also resign to allow an all-party government to take over. Japan's ruling party swept to victory in national elections today following the assassination of its former leader, Shinzo Abe. He was shot during a campaign speech last week. Police say the suspected gunman used a homemade weapon and had a grudge against a group he believed Abe had ties to. The former Prime Minister's funeral will be held tomorrow afternoon. Flights from Birmingham Airport were found to have the longest delays in the UK last year. Researchers from the Civil Aviation Authority say planes were about 12.5 minutes late taking off. Southampton Airport had the second poorest record, followed then by Heathrow. Scientists have designed a new contraceptive to help limit the number of grey squirrels in the UK. The government says it will be field tested soon. The plan involves trapping them in feeding boxes and then spiking their food with birth control pills. The project's goal is to help protect ecosystems and native red squirrel populations. Today could be the hottest of the year in Britain. The Met Office has issued a heat health alert for parts of the UK as temperatures are predicted to hit 33 degrees this week. The alerts will stay in place until Friday. People are being asked to check on those vulnerable to extreme heat. This is GB News and I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on your TV, radio and online. Here's what's coming up today.
As the Tory leadership race gets underway to replace outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson, we will ask who is in the running and what can they deliver for our country. Our political correspondent Tom Harwood will join us to give us the latest from Westminster.
Yes, meanwhile, we'll be looking into exactly what's going on with our Commonwealth friends in Sri Lanka, where the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa just resigned this morning after thousands of protesters stormed and occupied the presidential palace over the weekend.
And finally, sex education providers are reportedly teaching school children that prostitution is a, quote, rewarding job, and are even encouraging them to demonstrate where they would like to be touched sexually. Is this the state of sex education in this country? We're going to explore that.
You won't want to miss that. I'm sure you have some opinions on this, as do I, Bev. That's all coming up and much more across the programme. And you can get in touch, remember, as usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email you need. But first, Bev gives her views on the real questions we should be asking Tory leadership candidates.
OK, so we are in the midst of a Conservative Party beauty pageant. Politicians who've spent 2 years swerving difficult sofa interviews are lining up to tell you why they should be the leader of the country in 6 weeks' time. They're producing sales pitches, slow-motion videos with moving music beds, telling you why your future is safe in their hands. But I don't know about you, but I am finding these marketing campaigns infuriating. They talk glibly of a cost of living crisis, as though this has nothing to do with the unproven COVID scientific guesswork that they and the media passed off as fact, thereby nudging the country into a depression that we've never seen before. Ordinary people feel abandoned right now by our current political system. Many of us have nowhere to turn, and too many households are already at breaking point. It's almost like being in a cold war with your own government. The key protagonists, Sunak, Javid, Johnson, Hancock, Zahawi, you know the names, they will ride off into the sunset at some point to cash in the quid pro quo favours generated under the cloak of a global pandemic. So I have a few questions I'd like to ask them. The beauty of the last 2 years is that it allows us to see exactly who these wannabe top dogs are, where they stand on individual freedoms, the importance of our children and their education, mental versus physical health, and whether they believe that either truly matters, the extent to which they think the state should be allowed to meddle in the minutiae of our lives. I met some new mums this weekend, and when they were describing how the government hadn't let the grandparents meet their babies for 6 months, we all kind of shook our heads at how we ever thought that rule was acceptable. Some of us didn't. So every single interviewer needs to ask, will these politicians ensure no more lockdowns and restrictions this winter? Will they protect our sovereignty over health policy and not be influenced by the World Health Organization pandemic treaty, which would hand domestic control over to globalists that you haven't elected? Will they protect our rights to free speech, either by scrapping or amending the online harm safety bill, so that when, not if, another pandemic emerges, we will be able to discuss it openly and without censure on social platforms? Many candidates voted for COVID passports. Did they do so? I want to know, because they like the idea of a papers, please society, or because they didn't want to vote against the government. Now is the time to come clean. Most people feel overwhelmed at the moment. They're afraid of losing what they've built up in their own bank accounts. They're afraid of losing businesses. Even the prospect of a well-deserved holiday is being made increasingly difficult. Nursing homes are desperately short-staffed. Bed sores and malnutrition should not be apparent in a first world country. 20,000 carers at least were forced out of their jobs thanks to an unscientific drug mandate brought in by a man who isn't even in the job anymore. These much-needed workers have been completely forgotten and not even offered their jobs back. We lost 15,000 beds, remember, under Jeremy Hunt's time at the NHS, and we lost another 5,000 during lockdown. In the face of a growing population, what are the hopes of getting those beds back? That's what I want to know. It's now easier for a cross-channel migrant to see a doctor or a dentist than it is for people living in this country for decades. We need a leader who is willing to seize all the opportunities that Brexit gave us, not just try and keep us closely aligned to a failed Ponzi scheme called the EU. And for over a decade, the Tory party's greatest asset has been to remind us that not voting for them risks a Labour who would be worse. It's time to bring the party back to conservative values, with a leader who sees the potential of looking after their own people first. Nelson Mandela worked for his own people. He never intended to be iconic. The accolades quite rightly came because the world recognised his success in his own country. Great leaders aren't looking to be great. They usually just want to get the job done. And they don't need slick TikTok videos. They need values.
Well, that's really, I don't know what to say.
It's nice to get that off my chest.
Yeah, no, I found that quite moving, actually, because it was rehashing lots of the really important conversations.
When you say rehashing, do you mean I just did a cut and paste job? Thanks, Mercy.
No. It's, you know, at the moment, we're obviously in this Tory leadership election and people are sort of coming up with snazzy things that might, you know, snazzy policies that will get them elected. I'll cut fuel duty by 20, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But actually, there are many more serious questions we need to ask. And actually, I think it's quite disingenuous to say they're going to just magically cut tax and then the money's, you know, where's the money going to come from?
Absolutely.
I think there are real questions we need to ask about sort of what society do we want to be? Because we've changed completely as a society.
That's right.
Over the last couple of years because of COVID. Some of our freedoms have been chipped away at. You know, I feel less safe, and not you know, physically in terms of security, but I feel that my freedoms are less safe than they were two years ago.
100%.
And my children's freedoms will be less safe than previous generations. And those are actually really important questions.
We came so close to a sort of tyranny that you just wouldn't imagine in our lifetime. And we just have to hear from all of these candidates as what their vision is for the future. Do they ever feel that a government should implement those sorts of powers, as I say, that got into the minutiae of our lives in a terrifying way, and particularly with the mandating of the vaccine drugs? I was just listening to that story about the squirrels earlier and about how the squirrels are having contraception put in their food against their will. And I'm thinking, well, do the squirrels have bodily autonomy? I kind of know how the squirrels feel. I want to fight for the squirrels, but I realise that's ridiculous.
No, but it's a good analogy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where we've gone down this rabbit hole of authoritarianism a little bit.
Exactly.
But let us know what you think.
GBViews
at gbnews.uk. Now, of course, big story. Number of Downing Street hopefuls now stands at 11 after Foreign Secretary Liz Truss joined the race to become Prime Minister this morning.
The latest news is that the 1922 committee of backbench Tory MPs will decide today the timetable and the rules of the race to replace Boris Johnson today. However, the Labour Party are looking to make moves today too. They're expected to try and call for a parliamentary vote on dissolving Parliament.
Yes, well, here to help us pick through this is our political correspondent and general political wizard, I would say, Tom Harwood. Tom, so help us understand what's taking place over the next couple of days. On one hand, we have, of course, that backbench committee meeting up, and then we have Labour calling for potentially a confidence vote.
Yes, certainly. This is the sort of the twin dynamics of either side of Parliament right now. Actually, today we have some 1922 committee elections. Remember those executive elections that were going to be all about whether or not the 1922 committee changes the rules to get Boris Johnson out? Well, of course, Boris Johnson resigned last week. So today, the 1922 committee executive is elected by the backbenchers of the Tory party, and off the back of that, the new executive sets the rules for the contest that we'll see. And there are some variables here. We know the basic structure of it, that the parliamentary party whittles the number of candidates down to 2, and then those 2 candidates go out to the Tory party membership at large. The two key variables perhaps, is the threshold by which a candidate may stand. How many backers, how many MP nominators will they need in order to get onto that ballot paper? Last time round it was a lower number, but this time round we're expecting it may be doubled to potentially 20, maybe even tripled to something more than 30. One report says that it could be 36, 10% of the parliamentary party, a pretty high hurdle that could knock out some contenders before the real race actually gets underway. And of course, the other variable is how long does this leadership election last? How much time will there be to do rounds of voting? Last time round it was every Tuesday and every Thursday, but we've only got 2 weeks until parliamentary recess this summer. So it could be a more frequent timetable of votes in Parliament, perhaps one a day until we get down to those 2 candidates. And then how long will that contest go out and around the country for? How long will Tory party members have to vote on those 2? That's what the 22 will be deciding today. And on the other side of the House, of course, it's the Labour Party weighing up. We don't have confirmation yet, but it seems likely they'll want to lodge a vote of no confidence to try and get Boris Johnson out sooner, which is a little ahistorical when you look at exactly what Theresa May did, what David Cameron did, staying in place until the next Prime Minister. The Labour Party, however, want Boris Johnson out the door and an interim Prime Minister, perhaps Dominic Raab, in place. It does seem, however, that the Tory party is relatively united around the prospect of doing things as they've been done in recent history in this respect.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. That is just so well explained, because this is quite complicated procedural detail here. And, you know, for idiots like me, it's so good to know what's going to happen in the next step. So thank you. We'll be coming back to you, I'm sure, as the morning goes on. So for a bit more analysis, let's go to David Wooding, political editor at The Sun. Good morning, David.
Morning, Bev. Morning, Mercy.
Good morning. Just listening to Tom there explaining how this works procedurally with the 1922 committee. Just help me understand something. Will the 1922 committee want the grassroots Tory members to have a larger say on this, or a smaller say, so that it's actually the parliamentary Conservatives who decide?
Well, the final say is what the grassroots membership will have when it's whittled down to 2. So for the moment, this beauty contest of 11 Conservative MPs will be focusing their efforts on showing a bit of leg to the rest of their colleagues in Parliament, because they have to end up on that final ballot paper of 2. So it's all about luring in the support of MPs at this stage. Once this process is over and we have the final 2, then they have to appeal to the few 100,000 members of the Conservative Party. So maybe there'll be a completely different pitch then, a different messages going out. And of course, if they become Prime Minister, the winner then has to appeal to an even bigger mandate, which is the rest of us, the whole country.
Absolutely, and just give us some idea of who is ahead in that race so far. I think, if I'm not wrong, Rishi Sunak currently has the most backers from amongst the MPs.
Yes, that's right. He's out there in front at the moment. Liz Truss has joined today, so we'll see how her numbers rise. And the issue here is when somebody drops out, that their supporters then all splinter and go to a different person. So different wings of the party will be thinking how they can beat Rishi Sunak. Now, in particular, the right wing of the party. Their votes seem to be fractured over a number of MPs. I mean, Suella Braverman is doing quite well, and she's won the support of some members of the European Research Group of MPs. But if Priti Patel enters the race, they're going to then have to decide which one of them they back, because if they split the vote between 2 or 3 right-wing MPs, then that's going to give Rishi Sunak an even clearer run to the finishing line.
Is it safe to say, David, that whoever wins this particular contest is nailed on to take them into the next general election? I mean, I know anything's possible, right, at the moment, unless you've got a crystal ball. Because that has surely got to influence the decision of the MPs with who they back. Because, you know, Rishi Sunak, they might consider him to be an excellent political mover and very good at the shenanigans within Westminster. But I don't think the public are warning to him. I don't think he would be a shoo-in to take the Tories over the line in the next election, do you?
Well, you're absolutely right there, Bev. I mean, there was a poll recently, a YouGov poll, I think it was, which raised all the candidates who declared and pitched them against Keir Starmer, the Labour leader. And the only candidate who the general public say they would vote for over Keir Starmer was Rishi Sunak. Now, I put this to a couple of MPs saying, well, you've got to back Rishi Sunak, haven't you? He's the only one who can win the next general election. But then they say, well, hang on a minute. The only reason they're saying Rishi Sunak is because he's recognisable. They all know who he is. He's been Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's a major player. The others, you know, Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman, whoever you wish to name, are not as high profile. However, if they were to win and get into Downing Street, they'd be high profile within 5 minutes. Within a few weeks, everybody'd know who they were.
Well, let me ask you, David, it's funny you should say about Kemi Badenoch, because News UK, who own The Sun, who you write for, were very much on board with her this weekend. I think she had a lovely piece in The Times. And has she got the backing of Rupert Murdoch? Because that will make a massive difference.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we equally carried a piece by an interview with Grant Shapps this weekend. It doesn't necessarily mean we're backing them. We're just giving them a platform to say what they stand for, so our big army of readers know what the choices are out there. It may well be that the paper decides to back somebody as we run into that final furlong, but I think we need to wait and see who the membership and the public.
Come on, David. Come on, David. You must think I was born yesterday. That can't be true. You know it's The Sun that wins and loses probably every single general election of the last few decades in this country. You're a very, very powerful man. Whoever you put your support towards has got a very, very good chance of winning this. Who else did you say the paper had given support to over the weekend? Just so I can narrow it down if you're not going to tell me explicitly.
It's not giving support. We've written pieces with Rishi Sunak. We like Rishi Sunak. I won't deny that. We think he's a powerful, attractive politician who would do well as Prime Minister. There's no doubt about that. But we haven't come out and said, this is the man we should make the Prime Minister at this stage. We want to hear what they've all got to say. There's going to be a few hustings this week. There might be other hats thrown in the ring. I mean, Priti Patel might throw a hat in the ring. She'd be a very hopeful candidate as well.
OK.
Well, OK, I don't think Bev could quite get you on that, David, but thank you anyway.
To be honest, I don't know at this stage myself. I'm enjoying it. Yeah. I'm liking what they're all saying. The big interesting issue, though, is tax. It all seems to be everybody's going to cut taxes apart from Rishi Sunak.
Yeah,
he seems to be the favourite.
Yeah. Yeah, well, David, look, thank you.
And all the MPs want tax cuts.
Yeah, indeed. Well,
Sure.
David Wooding, thank you so much for joining us, political editor at The Sun. I think that's really interesting, actually, because I do think, as I said earlier, it's disingenuous to say, oh, when I come in, I'm going to cut tax straight away. OK, well, how are you going to make up for the difference, for the tax you're going to lose, essentially, from that? And Rishi Sunak's kind of been a realist and saying, look, I'm not going to cut tax until we can afford to cut tax, which is admirable, I would suggest.
No, I don't agree. People need help.
I know, but...
We need help right now. Cut your fuel tax. You don't have to cut income tax. But have a look at your net zero policy and work out how you can put some of that back in our pockets.
But, yeah, OK, that's true. That's true. I think the net zero thing... I think not Liz Truss, Penny Mordaunt actually has got the backing of Fair Fuel UK in terms of her policy on how we can... probably move a bit further
Mercy and
away
I
from
were talking about some of the coverage over the weekend. I don't know whether you saw it. I think it was in the Telegraph, wasn't it? And they'd done a picture of all the potential candidates. And Penny Mordaunt was there in a bikini. So we thought, thanks, guys, for making the woman look like a serious contender alongside all the men.
Not impressed. Well, after the break, we look into the tense economic and political situation over in Sri Lanka. You might have seen the images of the chaos that's been going on there. We'll tell you all about that after the weather.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Heat will be the key feature of the weather this week. We're starting hot and sunny. Temperatures will drop a little through the middle of the week, but the potential for those temperatures to build once more through next weekend. High pressure has been building in for some time. This weather front, though, is going to change things up a little bit, certainly across northern areas over the next 24 hours. For today, though, most places seeing plenty of blue sky. The sunshine may turn a little hazy at times as some high cloud spills in, and that cloud will be thickening across western parts of Scotland during the day. But for most, as I said, it's all about plenty of sunshine and the temperatures. 25, 26 across eastern Scotland, 24 likely in the east of Northern Ireland, but for much of England and Wales, mid to high 20s. 33 is likely somewhere across parts of eastern England. It's going to be very warm at night, especially in eastern England, but we will start to see that weather front bringing cloud and rain to parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. So things changing here, slowly turning a little cooler, but for most it's still a very, very warm night, a difficult night for sleeping. Parts of eastern England may stay above 20 degrees Celsius. That's going to be really quite uncomfortable. On to the details for Tuesday, and a different day for central Scotland, Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud, even a little bit of rain around. That should tend to fizzle out, turning brighter across the far north. A bit more cloud compared to today for England and Wales, but again, another very warm day. Hot across parts of eastern England, 32 Celsius, likely to be the top temperature. But things cooling off a touch across northern Scotland and Northern Ireland. And a freshening breeze, bringing a few showers here during Tuesday evening. Otherwise, things staying fine as we head into Wednesday, but that cold front will be kicking away the heat for a time. So temperatures Wednesday and Thursday still pretty warm and fine in the sunshine. This weather front will bring some rain across the north, but the high builds back and the temperatures could rise again this weekend.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. It is 10:28. This is To The Point with Mercy Moroki and me, Bev Turner, on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now the President of Sri Lanka announced his resignation this morning after protests. Thousands of protesters chanting slogans and waving the Sri Lankan flag stormed the presidential palace and the Prime Minister's official residence on Saturday.
This came after months of protests against the country's economic management went unheard, leading to mass shortages of food, fuel and medicine.
Yes, well, joining us to discuss this more is Ivan Correa, the former UK editor of Sri Lanka Travel Trade magazines. Thank you for joining us this morning. So just give us some background of what led up to this. I believe the primary reason is economic concerns amongst the people.
That's right. President Clinton once said it's the economy, stupid. And it's been all about the economy, or the mismanagement of the economy. It has resulted in Sri Lanka going bankrupt. Inflation is at 50.4%, staggering, and it's going to go up to 70%. There's no food. People are down to one meal a day, no petrol, no cooking gas. The country is in a bad shape. So it's no wonder that a revolution has happened.
It's fascinating, really, Ivan, because so many of these issues are happening in different countries around the world. Inflation, food shortages, fuel shortages. We're seeing a much lesser, to a lesser degree, in this country at the moment. But when did it start in Sri Lanka? Because here it's blamed on lockdowns and Ukraine.
Yeah.
When did the wheels start to come off?
This started way before Ukraine. I think it was about 6 or 8 months ago, but Sri Lanka was sliding down the precipice, really, because of mismanagement and corruption. The corruption was very bad and still is.
So President Rajapaksa, he was part of a political dynasty that have been in power for decades, is that right? We're looking at some of the pictures now. So how powerful was that dynasty?
Well, his family, the Rajapaksa family, controlled Sri Lanka like a private company. They took everything, you know, and this is why Sri Lanka is in so much trouble, because of the bribery and corruption. And Sri Lanka desperately now needs leaders with integrity, honesty.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a very badly run private company, isn't it? The government owes £51 billion and it's unable to make interest payments on its loans, let alone put a dent in the amount borrowed. I mean, where does this lead? Because I think the UN says 10 million people are having to skip meals. Well, how's this going to end up?
Well, there's no quick fix, because Sri Lanka owes so much money, as you said, defaulted on the debt for the first time since 1948. That was independence. And whoever comes into power, and on the 13th, he's about to resign. He says he's going to resign, and the Prime Minister, and they're going to have an all-party government. Now it's up to those people to decide what to do, whether to go with the IMF bailout, which is about $3 billion. India has provided $3 billion support. But it's going to take years for Sri Lanka to get back. Sri Lanka was a developed country. It's now in abject poverty.
Really. And just to warn you, Ivan, and also our listeners, we may break this up in a moment to go to Keir Starmer, who's going to give a speech. But I see these images with a kind of joy in my heart, because nobody, as my understanding is, nobody was injured, nobody was shot. We didn't have forces come out and shoot people from the steps of the presidential palace. How do the people in Sri Lanka feel? Are they similarly very happy about this now?
Well, this is Sri Lanka's Arab Spring. I would call it the Colombo Spring. And yes, as you say, there was no military coup, no army firing, although there was some firing when they tried to go in, but it was sheer numbers. 100,000 people marched on Colombo. Incredible. Some were walking for miles, commandeering trains, buses. They had had enough.
Wow.
People are starving, you know, and they want a change, real change in Sri Lanka.
Sorry, Mercy, go on. No, I was going to say, this sounds like a terrible generalisation, but what are Sri Lankan people normally like? Because I was trying to picture, we've had this biggest transfer of wealth in the last 2 years from the have-nots to the haves we've seen during lockdowns. We've created more billionaires across the world than ever before. But I can't imagine a situation in which British people would turn up at 10 Downing Street and storm the barricades. Like, are Sri Lankan people naturally rebellious?
They can be, but I think they were pushed. They were pushed by this dynasty to take action because they can't feed their children. They can't go in a car. There's no petrol or gas. There's no cooking gas. There's no food. So the time had come for this revolution to happen. And it's happened. On the 13th, he's resigning, the president.
Yeah, and very finally, because I think we could have to go to Keir Starmer for a second. But who should take leadership now in Sri Lanka? Of course, you know, people in this country probably won't have a clue. Vast majority of people won't have a clue about Sri Lankan politics. But just give us an idea of what kind of individual do the people of Sri Lanka now want at the helm, leading them out of this very difficult time?
They want someone pragmatic, someone who is honest, who's not going to take bribes. Sri Lanka is up to their necks in debt to China. They want someone to take control of the debt and restructure the debt and move them forward, really. But it's honesty and integrity is what's badly needed. Like in England.
I was going to say, that's something that we've been discussing.
Who's going to come after Boris Johnson?
You master that. Will you let us know how you do it, please? Yeah. My understanding is, as you say, none of us are experts on Sri Lankan politics ordinarily. So with the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, have I got that right?
Singha, yeah.
Singha, and the President resigning, then the Speaker will become a temporary President. Is that somebody called Mahinda Yapa
Abhiwardena?
Thank you. Your pronunciation is better than mine. So that person becomes the President-elect, effectively.
That's right. But Sri Lanka is really based on a Westminster role. So the Speaker will take control since both the President and the Prime Minister have resigned. He has a 30-day window, and then they will have to appoint an interim government because this man was going to go on till 2024 and elections.
OK.
Ivan, thank you so much for coming into the studio and helping us understand that. Look, now we are going to go to Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, who's setting out Labour's plans to move Britain forward. Let's have a listen.
Thank you. Thank you, and it's fantastic to be here this sunny morning. And Kim is absolutely right. The 5th visit I should have made up to the North East was in May when Arsenal were playing Newcastle, and we had tickets for that match away. And if you remember, it got moved to the Monday, which meant I couldn't come to the game, which was a blessing in disguise because we got absolutely battered. It was the end of our dreams for the season. So, Kim, thanks for reminding everybody about what happened to Arsenal just towards the end of last season. But it is absolutely fantastic to see you all here this morning. Thank you so much for coming. 3 days ago, as you may have seen, my focus was on the immediate past, on the importance of leading with truth and integrity, on the difficult times our country faced in lockdown, and on the fact that those who make the rules shouldn't break the rules. Now, I set out my position on that question and the difference between me and the Conservative Party, now desperately trying to launder its integrity, even as it stood by an unfit Prime Minister to the bitter end. Today, I want to put my focus where it ought to be, where it will be every day between now and the next general election, on the future, on the sort of nation that Britain can be, and the sort of nation Labour wants it to be. Because at the moment, Britain is stuck with a tanking economy, stuck at home, unable to get a passport or a flight, stuck on the phone trying to book a GP appointment. Our taxes are going up. Food and energy bills are out of control. And many of the public services that we rely on have simply stopped working. Britain deserves better than this. We need a fresh start. And I know you'd expect me to say this, but we're not going to get that from a Conservative Party infected with the chaos virus caught from Boris Johnson. Only Labour can reboot our economy and end the cost of living crisis. Only Labour can revitalise our public services and re-energise our communities. Only Labour can unite the country and clean up politics. These three tasks will define my government, because until we address them, we leave ourselves vulnerable to the shocks and crises we've endured this past long decade. Yet the way I see it, the challenges we face, climate change, technology, an ageing population, are an opportunity to re-energise Britain. Some nation is going to lead the world in new nuclear power. Why not this one? Some nation will create the first generation of quantum computers. Why not us? Some nation will design medicines personally to match our unique DNA. Why not Britain? This determination to move Britain forward is what drives me. Britain should be a confident and prosperous nation. But at the moment, it's full of people worried about the next bill coming through the letterbox. Take Zoe from Sunderland, just down the road. Like many people, Zoe's gas and electricity bills have doubled. She says, "I'm struggling to get by. I haven't managed a full shop for food in over a month. The cost of living is scaring me, and the future looks terrifying." Now, I've been up and down the country a lot recently. It's one of the good things about this job. And let me tell you, I've heard a version of Zoe's words from almost everyone I've met. Her words reflect the reality facing millions of working people in Britain right now. People like my family. I didn't come from a privileged background. My start in life was completely ordinary. Dad was a toolmaker. Mum was a nurse. Our house was a pebble-dash semi, and we had a Ford Cortina. Now, this was the 1970s. But I owe everything, all my values, to my upbringing, my work ethic and dedication to public service. But the real gift my parents gave me was the opportunity to get on. And that's why I came into politics. I've been lucky enough to take a journey through my life, from a working-class family to head of the Crown Prosecution Service. So when I say I don't want anyone in this country held back by their circumstances, you know, it's not just words. It's why, for me, the state of our economy is personal. Because when people like Zoe are so scared about the future, when our economy is so racked by low growth and insecurity, then working people get stuck. And that means Britain gets stuck. The most important goal of my Labour government will be to grow the economy. And we will not accept growth that doesn't improve people's lives. An economy can grow and leave some of its people behind. But a nation cannot grow in that way. Not long ago, I was in Burnley, and I was left in no doubt by the people I met there. They had great ambitions for themselves and for their town. But they don't have a government that shares that ambition. Boosterism and wishful thinking are not the same as ambition. And if you don't have a plan to make your hopes real, all you're selling is an illusion. Now, the other thing my background gives me is impatience. If you're born without privilege, you don't have time for messing around. You don't walk around problems without fixing them, or surrender to the instincts of organisations that look to preserve themselves rather than modernise. So, believe it or not, I'm not that interested in the political game, the daily saga of who's up and who's down in Westminster. No, not even this week or last. I'm impatient to get things done. I can see what's wrong with Britain and I want to fix it. It's what I've done with our own party. When I took this job on in April 2020, I knew we had a big task before us. We had to change our party and prepare for power all in one go. Not change for change's sake, but change with a purpose. To remake a Labour Party that understands its purpose is service, not self-indulgence. Country first, party second. That's why we had to root out the anti-Semitism which had infected our party. That's why we had to show our support for NATO is non-negotiable. Show that we want business to thrive and to prosper, and shed policies that won't work. The Labour Party was stuck in opposition, stuck licking its wounds after 4 painful defeats. Of course, we still have more to do. But now Labour is moving forward again. And this is what I will do for Britain. And I will do it with a plan to tackle the 3 biggest issues that we face. Rebooting our economy and ending the cost of living crisis. Revitalising our public services and re-energising our communities. And uniting the country and cleaning up politics. Let me start with the economy. I've explained why this is personal. How my mission in politics cannot be achieved unless we get our economy growing again. So let me tell you now, Labour will fight the next election on economic growth. The first line of the first page of our offer will be about wealth creation.
We seem to have lost the Keir Starmer there. We'll try and get him back to you in just a moment.
To be honest, I don't think he was saying anything particularly meaningful anyway.
That's what we were saying. What is exactly the point of this speech? It's not clear.
Come on, stop with the cliches. It's just the same old stuff again. And I don't know about you, but I am very bored of politicians telling us how poor they used to be.
And also about Sue from wherever. Some random hypothetical person. I'm sure whoever he's saying is real, but
there's so much. Surely we can do better than this. You know, and even then when he was talking about growing up in his pebble-dashed semi with his Ford Cortina, he's sort of then looking down his nose at people who still live in pebble-dashed semis and drive not the best cars in the world. Somebody just advises people.
I used to be poor like you guys.
I know, it's just painful.
Look, let's speak to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Tom, I'm sure you were listening to that. What did you make of his speech so far? It's not quite clear from what we heard there what exactly the point of that speech is.
Yes, it was a very long preamble talking about everything from football teams that Sir Keir Starmer supports to his family background. We were just starting to get on to what some might describe as a little bit of substance, that the Labour Party wants to put economic growth at the core of their next manifesto, that the first line of their next manifesto will be about wealth creation, something that we haven't heard the Labour Party talk about for quite some time, to be fair. But I'm not sure we're hearing that many specifics. It seems like this big speech from Sir Keir Starmer today is something designed to say, hello, look at me, I'm leading the Labour Party and I'm still here. This is a Labour Party that is being squeezed out of the media at the moment by the vast array of Conservative candidates. And I suppose for Sir Keir Starmer, his big task is to remain relevant throughout all of this. Although that does run up against the old political adage that when your opponents are tearing chunks out of each other, perhaps the best thing is to sit down, sit back and let them get on with it. Sir Keir Starmer obviously treading a tightrope there, and of course his strategy up until now has not been to declare too much policy, to keep his cards close to his chest. It was only a week or so ago that he announced that he had a completely blank slate of policy, in his words. He wiped the slate clean from the last Labour manifesto, and that we won't be hearing much policy from him until right before the next election. I suppose it runs up to that old adage that oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them. But clearly the battleground now, what everyone is talking about, as we were discussing earlier about the Conservative leadership race, everyone's talking about the economy, and that includes now the Labour Party too. It seems the entire political playing field, if you like, is all on the issue of how do you get economic growth, which is something that frankly hasn't been part of our national conversation for quite some time. So I suppose in that sense it's welcome. But really looking into the detail of what Sir Keir Starmer says, it seems to be broad brushstrokes rather than specific policy. No doubt that's something he will need to be challenged on.
Tom, let me just ask you about Liz Truss, because she's come out today and said that she wants to be considered for this job. Has she got any chance at all? How popular is she amongst politicians?
Well, one of the things about Liz Truss is that she has been in government for a very long time. She still is near the top of the Conservative home ranking of cabinet ministers amongst Conservative members. So she's popular to some extent with the membership. Of course, she signed all of those trade deals as we were leaving the European Union, something that she won plaudits from across the political spectrum for. Many people said that we wouldn't get a single trade deal, and she signed over 50 of them. But clearly, she's got a tough job, because there are lots of candidates who are sort of trying to deliver a change narrative, who want to be more radical on tax cuts. I think it's fairly well understood, short of any big upset in this race, that Rishi Sunak will be one of the individuals who goes through to those final two. The question is, who will be the other individual? Rishi Sunak in some way will be the economic continuity candidate, and who will be the economic change candidate is the big question. Rishi Sunak has been known for raising several taxes over the last 2 years. Liz Truss will be trying to get a big coalition behind her in favour of cutting taxes, but on that front she's up against Sajid Javid, she's up against Nadeem Zwahi, she's up against Suella Braverman, she's up against Kemi Badenoch. There are lots of candidates who are trying to take on that space, and some of them attracting the more radical wing of the Conservative Party more so than Liz Truss. She's got to balance her radicalism and tax-cutting instincts with the fact that she's been in cabinet continuously longer than any other candidate in this race.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thanks a lot. Moving situation, as always, very much a moving picture. OK, now,
go on.
Go on, you go, love.
This is interesting
Monday
one,
morning.
because we're parents, as you know, and we often discuss what schools are teaching our children these days. So what is the state of our sexual education classes in particular? There's been a few stories in the newspapers over the weekend that are of much concern. And here to give his thoughts on this is GBNews' very own Father Calvin Robinson, who has now been ordained. Calvin, good morning to you. Waiting for Calvin. Is he there? Is he there? Yes.
Good morning, ladies. I'm here.
Morning, Father
Hello,
Calvin. I wish
hi.
I was called Mother Maroki. That's the title I want. But anyway, congratulations on being ordained. Look, there was a story in, I think it was just in the newspapers over the weekend, which said that children are being taught that prostitution is rewarding work. Tell us more about that.
It's absolutely incredulous, isn't it? We're telling young people that sex work is not just an appropriate line of work, but we're teaching them how to do it safely. This goes through school all the way through to university, where at Durham University recently they were giving pamphlets out on how to be successful sex workers and remain a student at the same time. But it's much deeper than that. You know, we've had sex education in our education system for a long, long time. It used to be part of secondary school teaching. And now the government put forward something called relationship and sex education. And what that means is we're now teaching not just about sex, but about different types of relationships. So for example, to homosexual parents rather than one man and one woman, etc. All very well intentioned, but what it's done is it's pushed sex ed down from secondary school into primary school. And what that means is that we have activist teachers teaching age-inappropriate content to young kids, such as 5-year-olds being taught how to masturbate. Now, I know I'm saying that word pre-watershed. Even I'm reticent to use that language. And we're teaching young 5-year-olds not just this language, but the methodology behind it. It's entirely inappropriate. And what we have is a whole host of... Go on.
Sorry, Calvin. I was going to say, I think what we have to be really careful with here is not to become hysterical about giving our young people the language to explain their own anatomy is incredibly important, what they call their private parts, because that's a big part of this conversation for me, is what is adult behaviour, what is children's behaviour, and what should remain a private activity, and what, whilst acknowledging for the older age group that there may be areas which are a little bit niche, shall we say. I think
boundaries being broken down. The language that's being used isn't age appropriate, and age appropriate is the key term here. The reason we taught sex education in secondary school was because they were closer to the age of consent, and therefore we were preparing them for a life of sexual activity and to be safe in that life. And now we're taking that language 10 years earlier into primary school, where it's not appropriate at all. We're not just teaching about private parts. We're teaching about we're teaching about stimulating private parts at an age when they're not even sexual. We're sexualizing young children. That's what it is. It's coming down to, actually, I think we need to be a bit enraged about it. We need parents to be asking their kids, what are you being taught in PSHE? Or asking the schools, can you show me, please, the content that you're teaching my kids in RSE
schools
and
PSHE? Schools don't have a legal requirement to actually disclose the materials that they are using to teach their children this stuff, which is what I think. I think this is a real priority for whoever's the next Prime Minister and whoever's the next Education Secretary, to make it, to give parents the legal right to view the materials and the literature their children are being taught. You'd think that's common sense.
Yeah, and I would say to every parent out there, ask your school if you can see the content in PSHE or RSE or citizenship. Ask to see the values they're passing on, not just the knowledge. Because schools should be there to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. They should be there to impart knowledge, but actually they're passing on values. They're taking over from the parents. And if you ask them to see what they're teaching, and they are reticent, or they are resistant, or they don't want to show you, then you know there's an issue.
I agree.
A lot of schools are pushing back and saying, actually, we can't show you because of copyright or this or that. That is not correct.
You know what, Calvin? The thing is, the bottom line is, at the moment, the internet is educating our children about sex, and they have such immediate access to porn on handsets and on phones, and that is absolutely a parental responsibility to make sure that we're policing that. But goodness me, the internet search engines and the companies, the software companies, do not make it easy. The sellers of the handsets do not make it easy. We have to go on there and set the restrictions. They don't come on the handset automatically, which I think they should do. But with them being exposed to so much inappropriate material, it's really important that the schools, to some extent, can offset that and can make it clear of what is normal. And it's important that the parents do the same.
No, we're passing responsibilities again from parents onto schools. It's not a school's responsibility at all. It's 100% a parent's responsibility. And we say that kids are educating themselves on the internet. That's poor parenting. A child should have no access to the internet without parental supervision.
That's
they
true,
shouldn't have unfiltered access
the thing is,
to
Calvin,
pornography and the evils that are on the internet. Children
if
don't even need a smartphone.
I agree, but if my 11-year-old is on the school bus and she hasn't got a phone and the child next to her's got a phone and the child next to her goes, oh, look at that picture, look what they're doing, she has to know that she's... But yeah, that poor parenting becomes my problem. So, therefore, she needs to know that she can come to me and ask, Mummy, what was that?
Absolutely. That is the key. You, as a parent, need to have the relationship with your child that they can come to you and talk to you about things that they've seen from other kids that aren't getting as good parenting as what you're giving. And that's always been the key. You know, bullying and all these issues around cyberbullying is prevalent. I cannot say it often enough that parents, please do not give your children a smartphone. If you want them to have a phone for safety reasons to and from school, give them a dumb phone. They do not need internet access.
Well, thank you very much, Father Calvin, for speaking about that issue. Lots of people, I'm sure, will agree with you. Thank you, Calvin. Keep your thoughts coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. What do you make of all of that and, in fact, anything we've been speaking about today? We'll be back with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views after this break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. This is The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on your TV, radio and online.
That's right. We are with you until midday. It is a show jam-packed with all the biggest stories of the day, discussion, expert guests, and, of course, your opinions as well. We haven't got to them yet, but we will, I promise you. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Yes, indeed. That is the email. But first, let's give you your latest headlines.
Today on GB News. 11 candidates are now in the running to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. Liz Truss has become the latest senior cabinet minister to add her name to the growing list of contenders. The Foreign Secretary is pledging to lower taxes and says she wants to get a firm grip on spending. Other contenders include the former Health Secretaries Sajid Javid and Jeremy Hunt, the ex-Chancellor Rishi Sunak, his successor Nadhim Zahawi, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps and the Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt. The Conservative MP Robert Jenrick told GB News he's backing Rishi Sunak.
Personally, I think it's best to focus on what that individual can really offer the country. And as I say, I think Rishi is the person of the greatest ability. He's an incredible hard worker. He's someone who has achieved enormous things already for the country. Front and centre will be the economy. And so choose the most economically literate person and the person that the public trust the most. to deliver for them.
A timetable for the leadership contest is expected to be drawn up this week once the new 1922 executive has been voted in today. The influential group of backbenchers will then finalise the rules of the leadership contest. They're meeting today to discuss changes that could limit the number of candidates. They're also looking at the rules governing a no-confidence vote, something the Labour Party is already pushing for in order to attempt to immediately remove Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Well, Sir Keir Starmer's announced that Labour will fight the next election on growing the economy. In a speech this morning in the North East, he's promised a fresh start for Britain. The Labour leader hit out at what he called the hypocrisy of those who served in the Prime Minister's government, saying they supported tax hikes despite being opposed to them all along. He also outlined Labour's plans for the country during a speech in Newcastle this morning.
Britain deserves better than this. We need a fresh start. And I know you'd expect me to say this, but we're not going to get that from a Conservative Party infected with the chaos virus caught from Boris Johnson. And this is what I will do for Britain. And I will do it with a plan to tackle the three biggest issues that we face: rebooting our economy and ending the cost of living crisis.
Some international news now. The president of Sri Lanka is going to resign after protesters stormed the capital over the weekend, demanding political reform. Tens of thousands of protesters bombarded the official homes of both the president and the prime minister in Colombo on Saturday in the wake of the economic crisis in the country. The prime minister's office says the president would step down on Wednesday, with the prime minister adding he'd also resign to allow an all-party government to take over. Japan's ruling party swept to victory in national elections today following the assassination of its former leader, Shinzo Abe. He was shot during a campaign speech last week. Police say the suspected gunman used a homemade weapon and as a grudge against a group he believed Abe had ties to. The former Prime Minister's funeral will be held tomorrow afternoon. Heathrow Airport is warning passengers it could cut more flights this summer. Tens of thousands of people have already been affected by flight delays and cancellations over the past few months. Heathrow has apologised for the disruption as it tries to recover from losing thousands of jobs during COVID lockdowns. Meanwhile, flights from Birmingham Airport were found to have the longest delays in the UK last year. Researchers from the Civil Aviation Authority say planes were about 12.5 minutes late taking off. Southampton Airport had the second poorest record, followed then by Heathrow. Scientists have designed a new contraceptive to help limit the number of grey squirrels in the UK. The government says it will be field tested soon. The plan involves trapping the animals in feeding boxes and then spiking their food with birth control pills. The project's goal is to help protect ecosystems and native red squirrel populations. Today could be the hottest of the year in Britain. The Met Office has issued a heat health alert for parts of the UK as temperatures are predicted to hit 33 degrees this week. The alerts will stay in place until Friday. People are being asked to check on those vulnerable to extreme heat. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
A very good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on your TV, radio and online. Here's what's coming up in our final hour.
There are 11 Tory MPs currently in the race to be the next Prime Minister. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is the latest candidate to declare her bid in the contest. The 1922 Committee of Backbench Tory MPs will meet today to decide the timetable for the leadership race.
Yes, but what about our economy? Attorney General Suella Braverman and Chancellor Nadine Zahawi have backed the plan for a low-tax Thatcherite economy. But how will this work? And is it empty promises? I want to know how they'll deliver that. We'll be discussing that later on in the show.
And also, in light of the protests that took place over the weekend in Sri Lanka and the Netherlands about food shortages and the state of the economy, we're wondering if global farming on a global scale, of course, is at risk and whether net zero is really the way forward.
Yes, that's all coming up in the next hour and much more as well. And we're going to get to your views and you can keep them coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. Now, one of the maxims I live by is, if you want something doing right, do it yourself. Don't complain that somebody else is doing it all wrong. Don't sit there begruntled, muttering under your breath. Just do it yourself. And that's advice the Labour Party would do well to listen to. Over the last few days, as the Tory leadership hopefuls have entered the race, the left and its minions have taken it upon themselves to mock and ridicule the ethnic minority contenders. Dr. Shola Mos-Shogbamimu, agitator-in-chief, said that Nadhim Zahawi took the Chancellor job because he is, and I quote, a self-serving, shameless racial gatekeeper. She also said that Kemi Badenoch, a rising star of the Conservative Party and former Equalities Minister, is a, quote, gift for racists and white supremacists who uses her black identity to legitimise systemic oppression and uses black minority identity to run for Prime Minister. Now, Dr. Shola sucks the life and normality out of discourse and replaces it with race and lunacy. You also have barrister Jolyon Moam, known as the Fox Slayer in some circles after he beat up a fox with a baseball bat, tweeted this: do you think the members of your party are ready to select a brown man, Rishi? This was something I had to learn from third-party sources, since the man has blocked me on Twitter despite my never having had a single interaction with him. Perhaps he's afraid of being challenged by a brown woman. And you have Nadine White, so-called race correspondent for the Independent newspaper, who posed this question: can you imagine a black or Asian person leading the Conservative Party? Others argue that the very concept is diametrically opposed to the party's core values. To which I replied this: given that the Conservative Party has produced 3 times as many black or brown cabinet ministers as the Labour Party ever has, I'd shut up if I were you. That was what I said to Nadine. And isn't the real, more logical question to ask, can you imagine a black or brown person leading the Labour Party, a party which has only ever produced 1 non-white Secretary of State? Or perhaps even, can you imagine a black or brown person leading the EU? Now, we'd surely have to be in an alternative universe if that happened, surely, wouldn't we? Well, back in 2019, I wrote this in The Times. Labour must stop its demonisation of ethnic minority Tories. That was back in 2019, 3 years ago. At the time, Labour MP Clive Lewis has said that James Cleverly and the other black members of that cabinet had to sell their souls and self-respect to get there. In a previous incident, then Labour MP Emma Dent Code called Sean Bailey, the black Conservative mayoral candidate for London, a, quote, token ghetto boy. It's all a bit Groundhog Day, this mudslinging at ethnic minority leadership hopefuls. So I go back to that adage. If left-wing people, if the left want something doing right, if they want an ethnic minority leader that they approve of, do it yourself then. Go on, you win an election. You crack on with nurturing talented ethnic minority MPs and getting them ministerial experience. You elect your own ethnic minority leader. Until you do that, and I won't hold my breath, then just be quiet. Shut it. Put a sock in it. Just sit this one out and let the grown-ups get on with it.
It's so interesting, Mercy. Why do you think Labour have never had more multicultural, ethnically diverse candidates?
They have had candidates. So the technical reason why they haven't sort of had ethnic minority ministers is because we first elected a black MP, the UK, in 1987. Now, between 1987 and now, there's only been Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. So the Conservatives have been in power for so much longer during that period. So they haven't had necessarily, you could argue, the time or the opportunities to do that. But then again, you know, they've never even had a female leader. I mean, what's their excuse for that? They seem to, I don't know what's going on there, but they play quite a lot of identity politics, and they're in favour of things like all women shortlist, all black shortlist, things like that. Very tokenistic gestures. Whereas I think the Conservative Party have, broadly speaking, you know, promoted and elected people on merit. They don't play these identity politics games. They don't do the whole, oh, we're electing this person because they're going to be a great, you know, role model for black women, in the case of Kemi Badenoch.
Yep.
They elect them based on merit. That's my assessment of it.
I mean, they should... Of course, we want our political landscape to reflect, as far as possible, I imagine, our demographic landscape in this country. Would you agree?
I think what I would say is, yes, I agree in principle, but I think it becomes very dangerous when you try to force that through things like quotas, through things like all-black shortlists.
So do you think that's already been done, like that work has been done? Because I remember talking about this maybe 10 years ago and saying that we did need some of those shortlists because the wheel of change was not turning quick enough. You only have to look at... I mean, I was looking at the G7 summit the other day when all those white middle-aged men, just all in power, the most powerful men in the world, they still are predominantly men. They're all, 100% of them were men, and they were all white. Now, is that right? No, I don't think it necessarily is, but I don't know what the solution is. But are we in a post-racial world, is what I'm saying to you now,
No, we're not. But what I would say is I would rather... This will seem controversial to people, but I would rather live in a society that has at its core the principle of meritocracy and be underrepresented in politics than live in a society where there's all these black women and all these black people, whereas it's done in a tokenistic way. Does that make sense? So my concern is making sure people are given the opportunities to progress in life, and meritocracy is at the core.
Well, it's controversial. Let us know what you think. GBViews at GBnews.uk. It has been a busy week, of course, in politics, and with now 11 MPs putting themselves forward in the race to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The latest to do so is Liz Truss. She's pledged to cut taxes from day one. The 1922 Committee of Backbench Tory MPs will meet today. We're going to go over to Tom Harwood, who's going to bring us more of this, I believe. Is he? Or are we going to look at... So we're going to look at the runners and riders first? OK.
We'll go to Tom. OK, well,
we're going to go to Tom.
Tom is there. So, Tom, just give us an update about what the leadership contest is looking like at the moment. I believe Liz Truss has been the most recent person to declare she wants to be Prime Minister.
Well, there's such a huge array of candidates. It's really interesting looking at the mechanics of how these individuals will actually get through to that final two. There seems to have been a consensus emerging around the idea that Rishi Sunak will be one of those final two that go out to the membership. The big question is who may be his challenger, and we've got such an array of different candidates, some boasting quite a few supporters, some, well, one boasting no supporters at all. Raymond Chishti declared last night, a Conservative MP elected in 2010, never having held any ministerial brief. It's probably he's not going to be one that gets through the nomination process, because of course we're learning about this process today. How many MP backers will candidates need to get onto that ballot, and how many candidates may well get through what will be an expedited first stage of this process? There's only 2 weeks left of Parliament before the summer recess, and within that time the Conservative Party will have the big task of whittling down what looks to be 11 or 12 candidates down to just 2. And the other big concern for many, the question, the games of Parliament, is what exactly will be the game playing over the next few weeks? Are people backing individuals out of principle, or maybe are some people backing other candidates in order to knock further ones out of the race? Last time around, there was much rumour that Rory Stewart, the International Development Secretary at that point, has his campaign inflated surreptitiously by the Boris Johnson campaign in order to knock others out and move the story away. Could potentially something else like this happen with a different candidate getting inflated to knock others out? It's all to play for, I suppose, specifically when it comes to that second place.
I do hope you've got your sunscreen on. I don't want to sound like your mother, but it's very hot out there, and I do worry about that beautiful complexion. So look after yourself. Now, we're going to bring you a full list. I think this is really useful. Let's have a look at the list of contenders for the leadership.
Yes, well, you have former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch.
Now, she was support of Michael Gove over the weekend as well. She's an interesting character. Coming in at number 2, Attorney General Suella Braverman.
Yes, who is a bit of a culture war figure, and she's got the backing, supposedly, of members of the ERG, not least Steve Baker, who used to be the chair of the European Research Group, very anti-Brexit, pro-Brexit there.
Right. Then we've got newly appointed Foreign Office Minister Raymond Chisti. Have I pronounced that correctly?
Yeah, no idea who that is.
No idea who that is. I didn't know. Where's that name come from? Well, fabulous, Remy. Do send us an email and tell us who you are. We got no idea.
Well, you've got former... everybody will know this one. Former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt.
Oh, yeah.
He obviously had a rough time as Health Secretary with the GPs, was in a bit of a spat, really, with the GPs when he was back when he was Foreign Secretary. You also have former Health Secretary Sajid Javid.
That's right. We've got Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt.
Yeah.
Transport Secretary Grant Shapps as well now.
And, of course, former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and former Secretary of State, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. And... bit of a dark horse, maybe. Backbencher Tom Tugendhat. He's the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. He was actually on this programme yesterday speaking to Alistair Stewart.
He was good, actually. If you could catch up on the global app, if you on the GB News app, if you want to have a look at that, do have it. Upload the app and watch that back because it was a really good interview. Chancellor Nadeem Zahawi, of course, you all know him.
And now let's go to Lord Robert Hayward, a Conservative peer and polling analyst. Good morning, Lord Hayward. I just want to ask what you make of all of this. The list is growing longer and longer. Who do you think will be at the top of that list when all is said and done?
I think the key thing which Tom Harwood referred to just now, was the question of what the numbers of signatures that you're going to require to enter the first ballot. Graham Brady in the 1922 will set those figures today, and some may fail to get enough signatures. It'll be the way of sifting some people out. But if that happens, those supporters have got to go somewhere. So it's very much open as to who will appear at what round and how successful they're likely to be. The two people who've got large numbers, good numbers so far, Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt, are looking as if they'll progress and clear any limit imposed by the 1922. Lots of questions about the others.
Just let us understand, Lord Harwood, those of us who aren't in Westminster every day, to what extent have these MPs always had in the back of their minds the people that they might need to keep close in case this day arrives? And is this the time when those relationships come to fruition?
Oh, there's no question that both the MPs who are expressing support for different people today and those who are seeking support will have had these sorts of things in mind for a long time. The Tory party is very good at regicide. They're only matched by the Australian political parties in Western democracies. So there's no question long-term friendships, long-term relationships will have been in the back of people's minds. And what is striking is that actually the supporters that have come out for different candidates quite seem to cross, let's say, the Brexit barrier, but other barriers. There's some really interesting mixes of supporters for a number of the different candidates.
I think it's notable that the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak is pretty much the only candidate at the moment not saying my big headline policy will be to cut tax. Do you think that will work in his favour or against him?
No, I think he's made his statement for now. What I've noticed over the interviews that some of the candidates have done both yesterday and today is that they're having real difficulty clarifying where all this money is going to come from. What are they going to cut to be able to cut the taxes? Because it's not only a question of tax, but it's also a question of sound money that the Tory party believes in. And therefore, I think several of the candidates are going to have to get much more clear in relation to how they're going to achieve the figures that are being bandied about by some of them.
OK. All right, thank you very much for your time this morning. Lord Robert Hayward there, Conservative peer and polling analyst. Thank you very much for joining.
And just before we go to a break, Raymond Chishti, who we mentioned there earlier, he is a Member of Parliament for Gillingham and Rainham. He's obviously Parliamentary Under-Secretary for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs. He was the Vice Chairman of the Conservative Party for Communities, but not many people would have heard of him, to be honest. No. Not a household name by any stretch of the imagination.
And highly unlikely to become one in the next 2 weeks.
Yes, but he has announced his candidacy, so there you go.
OK, right. We have all of those candidates. That's what we're calling them. I want to say contestants. It's not a quiz show. We're going to be talking about them a bit more, what they would do in the next few years and what all of these tax pledges would really mean. But first of all, it's a very important day for this. Here's the weather.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Good morning, it is 11:26 on Monday morning. This is To The Point with me, Bev Turner and Mercy Moroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now many of the leadership hopefuls looking to become the next Tory party leader and hopefully the next Prime Minister for them, while they're being out-competing each other on their tax plans as core elements of their proposal. Candidates in the running include Attorney General Suella Braverman and Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi, have backed a Thatcherite blueprint for a low-tax economy.
The abundance of tax-cutting promises announced so far contrasts with former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, who's played down the prospect of tax cuts before public finances improve.
Yes, well, now let's speak to economist Julian Jessup on this. Is it wise for Rishi to say, hang on a second, let's not cut tax, let's not promise tax cuts until we have the books balanced or close to balanced?
Well, I understand obviously where he's coming from. He does feel the need to be fiscally responsible, and cutting taxes willy-nilly can be quite damaging, including the impact on inflation. But I still think it's right to look at cutting taxes, both in principle, people should be able to keep and spend more of their own money, but also in practice, particularly now, when the economy is fragile, you need a boost to demand. But tax cuts can also help with the supply side of the economy, raise productivity, and ultimately result in lower inflation than we'd otherwise have had.
How bad do you think things are going to have to get, Julian, before Rishi Sunak would agree that cutting taxes would be a good idea?
Well, to be fair, I don't think he's completely opposed to them. After all, he has just announced one of the biggest cuts in tax, the increase in the national insurance threshold. And of course, he's willing to pump loads of money into the economy during the COVID pandemic. So I don't think he's ideologically opposed to tax cuts. But at the end of the day, you have to look at what his rhetoric is. I mean, he's saying all the time fiscal responsibility. So it doesn't sound like somebody who's in a hurry to cut taxes further. And I think that will be a problem, not only for the people who might be voting for him, but also for the economy.
Even I'm old enough to remember the coalition government, and they had that big slogan, didn't they? Long-term economic plan, long-term economic plan. That's what they kept saying. I've been hearing similar from some of the contenders saying, look, guys, we need a long-term plan for the economy. But then again, I think your party's been in government for quite a long time. Shouldn't you have had a long-term plan? Are you suggesting there's no long-term plan? What have you made of what they've been saying around that?
Well, I think that's a good point. I mean, first of all, there's nothing fiscally irresponsible about raising taxes too soon and tipping the economy into recession. And I think that's the mistake that Rishi was making about a year ago, when he did announce those big increases in personal tax and also corporation tax. Now, he did start to row back on some of those, but it's still the case that taxes are going up faster in the UK than pretty much any other major economy, so there's a problem there. I think he's right that tax cuts alone, though, are not the solution to the UK's problems. I think they're part of it, but you also need to look at doing other things. You need to sort of improve the supply side of the economy. You need to get more investment in particular. And I think Rishi Sunak was quite good talking about that. But at the end of the day, if he's a chancellor that's aggressively raising taxes, particularly on businesses, then he's not going to get those productivity gains and the higher investment he's looking for.
Because isn't our problem that we've got such slow growth as much as anything? Isn't that my understanding, my economics A-level that I'm digging deep into here, is that we've got such a slow growth at the moment that there's just not enough money in anybody's pockets.
Well, that's exactly right. At the end of the day, the best way to improve the health of the public finances is to boost growth, to have a stronger economy. And that improves the tax base. And therefore, the Treasury gets more money in without the need to raise tax rates. But unfortunately, what we're doing is that we're raising tax rates, both on personal income tax and other things, national insurance contributions and what's happening on business taxes. So that's counterproductive. It slows the economy, reduces the tax base, and the Treasury ends up with less money than would otherwise have had.
What do you think the likelihood is of that sort of corporation tax being increased? Because it's 19% at the moment, and it's going up to 25. Is it 24?
That's 25%.
In 2024, I believe. Lots of them have said, look, I would immediately reverse this planned cut. A lot of people at home might hear corporation tax and think, oh, this is something for massive corporations making billions, millions of dollars. But actually it affects small businesses too, doesn't it?
That's absolutely right. The key point about corporation taxes is ultimately they're not paid by corporations. They're paid by real people. Now, it might be shareholders who are relatively well off, but often it's the customers who end up paying higher prices or the workers who have to accept lower wages as a result. So corporate tax increases actually hurt real people. And because they also deter investment in the economy, they affect the economy as a whole. I mean, it's very hard to grow your economy, to keep inflation down if businesses aren't investing. They're worried about their tax bills going up. They're not going to invest. They may well go elsewhere, particularly to other countries. Even France has been trying to lower the burden of corporate tax over the last few years. So the UK really stands out here. And at a time when he's sort of trying to launch global Britain post-Brexit, I think a huge increase in corporation tax is a really bad idea.
Julian, I'm really interested to know what you, as an economist, have thought about the pitches so far from the candidates. The only person that I've heard, I might be wrong, but say they have any sort of long-term economic plan, actually, was Tom Tugendhat, who said, I will come at this with a 10-year goal. And that was music to my ears. I'd much rather somebody come along and say, this is what I want to do in the long term, rather than I'm just going to make you happy now?
Well, I think that's really important. I mean, even people like me that believe that tax cuts are part of the solution are looking for a longer-term plan, including on things like public spending. So we need to address some of the huge pressures on public spending over the several decades ahead, including the impact of an ageing population on health and social care. So you do need a long-term plan. But I think also you need to do something in the short term, because we are clearly facing a major cost of living crisis. The economy is fragile. It can't all be left to the long term. I think you need to be willing to do bold things now. Now, I'm not personally going to endorse anybody. I don't even have a vote. My sort of sneaking suspicion is that I hope the best woman wins, whoever that may be. But we'll see. And I think anybody who comes up with a decent plan, I'll be willing to give them my support.
Yeah. And just very finally, we've had the October from Ofgem, we've had the predictions, is that the right word, for what the energy bills are going to be come October when that cap is revised, and they are much higher than many people anticipated. Does this mean we're going to have to see whoever's leader next come up with this plan immediately for how they can help families with those energy bills, which are going to skyrocket yet again?
I think that's absolutely right. And there are lots of options that you can take, and which option you take partly depends on what you're trying to do. But if you're trying to inject demand into the economy and help people with the cost of living crisis, then cuts in indirect taxes like VAT are probably best, and doing more to help low-income households in particular. The other stuff I'm talking about, things like cuts in corporation tax, that's for the medium to longer term. That's not going to help people now, so you need to do both.
All right, thank you, Julian. Right, Julian Jesper, economist. Now, after the break, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge took Prince George along to the royal box for the men's singles final yesterday. We'll be speaking to biographer Angela Levin about their day at the tennis. But before that, here is all your news.
Good morning, it's 11:34. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Boris Johnson says he's determined to deliver the mandate he was elected on in 2019 in his final few weeks as Prime Minister. It's his first public appearance since he resigned as Conservative leader. There are now 11 candidates in the running to take over. Liz Truss has become the latest senior cabinet minister to add her name to the growing list of contenders. She joins others vying for the job, including ex-Chancellor Rishi Sunak. A timetable for the contest is expected to be drawn up this week once the new 1922 executive has been voted in today. The group of backbenchers will then finalise the rules of the leadership contest and will discuss changes that could limit the number of candidates. Sir Keir Starmer has announced that Labour will focus the next election on growing the economy. In a speech this morning in Newcastle, he said Britain's dealing with a crumbling economy and deserves better.
Britain deserves better than this. We need a fresh start. We're not going to get that from a Conservative Party infected with the chaos virus caught from Boris Johnson. This is what I will do for Britain. And I will do it with a plan to tackle the three biggest issues that we face: rebooting our economy and ending the cost of living crisis.
Heathrow Airport is warning passengers that it could cut more flights this summer. Tens of thousands of people have already been affected by flight delays and cancellations in recent months. Heathrow's apologised for disruption as it tries to recover from losing thousands of jobs during COVID lockdowns. And today could be the hottest of the year so far in Britain. The Met Office has issued a heat health alert for parts of the UK as temperatures are predicted to hit 33 degrees this week. People are being asked to check on those vulnerable to extreme heat. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, it's 11:38 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
Now, the appeal hearing to decide whether the life support system for 12-year-old Archie Battersby should be continued or not is taking place today. Specialists at the Royal London Hospital think it is highly likely that he has passed away, while Archie's parents, Holly Dance and Paul Battersby, disagree.
That's while Archie suffered brain damage after being found with a ligature over his head in April. And we can go now to our London reporter, Alice Porter, who has the latest. Alice, we talked about this case a few weeks ago. What's the update on this now?
Hi there, good morning. Well, last month, a High Court judge ruled that on the balance of probability, Archie Battersby was in all likelihood dead. She had to look at the evidence because they have not been able to conduct brainstem tests, but looking at the evidence from multiple doctors from both the Royal London Hospital and other hospitals as well, Mrs. Justice Arbuthnot concluded that Archie Battersby was brainstem dead. Now, the parents of Archie Battersby, Paul Battersby and Holly Dance, they both were successful in appealing the decision to have the ventilator switched off because of Mrs. Justice Arbuthnot's decision that he was brain dead. So 3 appeal judges have allowed a review to go ahead, which is taking place today, on the understanding that they need to look at what is in Archie's best interest, and that is going to be more of the focus that we're going to be seeing over today. It is what is in Archie's best interest rather than what we saw previously, which was more of a discussion about whether he is alive or dead. The parents of Archie Battersby very much argue that he is still alive because his heart is still beating. They still say that there have been signs of response from him, but I think the focus is going to be very much more about what is in his best interest, and that's what Mr. Justice Hayden is going to be looking at. So this has been sent appeal. Their parents have appealed this. Mr. Justice Hayden is going to be looking at the evidence to see whether he should continue on a ventilator at the Royal London Hospital. This morning, it only just got underway at 10:30, but we did hear from a barrister representing the hospital, and they say Archie Battersby, he is not digesting food properly. He's very vulnerable to chest infections. They say he is unresponsive and won't make a recovery. But the barristers who are representing Archie Battersby and the family, they say that the original judge, that's Mrs. Justice Arbuthnot, had not shown beyond reasonable doubt that Archie was dead, and that they do not want the ventilator to be switched off.
Okay, thank you, Alice. Beautifully explained. What a horrible, horrible situation. It's such a sad story. It was just an accident that led to Archie being in this position, and our hearts go out to his family. It's just awful. Every parent's nightmare.
Yes. Well, let's end the hour with something a bit more happy, a bit more lighter. We're joined by a royal biographer, Angela Levin, to go through all the things that have been happening with the royal family, not least, of course, their weekend out at Wimbledon. So thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you. What was the weekend like at Wimbledon for the royal family? Not Archie, oh my goodness. Prince George was there, wasn't he?
I thought it was absolutely wonderful for so many different reasons. The two parents on either side, they explained constantly to George what was happening and going on, so that he really, really understood it, which was absolutely charming. I thought it was a shame he had to wear a suit, jacket and tie. I know it's a law, but actually I don't think it should be applied to 8-year-olds. I think maybe, they're 13, but he was very hot. But, I mean, he seemed to me to be much less shy than he has been over the last 2 or 3 years. He's very shy. His sister is not at all shy, but he is shy. And I think they've been very clever to slowly introduce him to more and more people, so it's not such a big deal. What was absolutely charming was after Djokovic had won, he went down to see him, and he asked George, would you like to hold the trophy? George went like this, and I thought that was such a lovely sign for a child, a really jolly child. OK, mate, do pass it over. But it was very heavy, so he passed it on to his mother. I think they're very caring. They let him have a bit of a say, but they're right there for him all the time. And I thought that, it was very exciting because he likes tennis. Federer teaches him tennis. And people asked him, why do you have such a wonderful...
As you do.
Yeah, and they're friends, family friends. And he said he wanted to give him a good chance. And it was fun to try and encourage him to really enjoy playing tennis as much as he's done.
It's been a bit of a debate point, Angela, this morning, isn't it, of whether he should have been made to wear this suit and tie in the royal box. And as you say, it's the protocol, it's the dress, the dress code. And I was thinking, poor little kid, he should be there in his shorts and T-shirt. But then I also thought, this child is going to have to do things the rest of his life that he doesn't want to do. He's going to have to adhere to requirements, to protocol, to rules and restrictions. And they probably have to get him in the mood for it now.
But he might also have had the option, and he decided he wanted to look like his dad. He wanted the jacket, he wanted the tie. He might have said, no, I want to dress as I should.
He'd be nothing like my kids then.
No, but I think sometimes because he's got this aura and he knows now what's going to happen, that he might say, well, I want to be grown up, because he felt very grown up there with his parents, just him.
Well, he looked it. He's a poppet. He really is.
But they all seem so close. That's what's so nice.
I mean, I don't know that. Obviously, I've never seen him in the flesh, but he seems like a really tall... Is he 7, 8? How old is he? 8.
But he's grown fast. They start really growing fast. But his whole deportment is very sophisticated now. And, he was waving at people without being asked. The camera's there and he was waving. And I thought that was well done, that they're getting him out of his shyness, because that's going to be really important to him, that he can shake hands and say hello and make small talk. But that was the best signature of all.
Kate's brilliant at that as well, isn't she? Can we
you see,
for a moment, she looks incredible every time you see her.
She's criminal. How good
she doesn't drop the ball, does she?
time.
To use a tennis sort of analogy, she always gets it right, doesn't she?
Well, what's interesting is that she's obviously got to divide herself between being a princess and doing far more engagements than she thought, because of the Queen coming back and Prince Harry going and Andrew not allowed to. So she's got a load of work to do, but she's taking on more and more patronages. But she seems to easily go into parenthood. You don't feel that she's not seeing the children, leaving it to the nanny, because when the children respond to her, wherever they are completely relaxed and easy with her. So you really feel that they are all... But what's interesting, I think, is that they're moving very close to her parents, as is Pippa, her sister, and husband James. They've bought a 15 million enormous house in enormous... as has already her brother. And I think that shows that there's a very strong family link there. They didn't have to be there. They could be anywhere, but they're all going to Berkshire, and they're going to be together, which I think gives her a lot of strength and is very nice for the children.
And must also be really lovely for Prince William, who, having lost his own mother, what became quite clear early on when they met was that Kate came from this very close family with, I think her mother plays a big part in also the development of these grandchildren. I think she can take some credit for this.
Very hands-on, yes. I mean, I think she should take credit for William far more than just that.
I agree.
Because they were enabled to show them what a normal home was like. They obviously have a way of encouraging people without being too nosy. And with Catherine there, he learnt first how to be a husband and then how to be a father. It was difficult for him to be a father at first because he hasn't got any experience like that. He doesn't go around and see people changing nappies and all that sort of thing. But I think that the Middleton family must really be complimented on that because he's so much more relaxed. And I think he's got over the terrible trauma of coming from a family where it is so dysfunctional. Not entirely, you can never change what's happened to you, but he's actually realised that he doesn't have to be like that. And with a Kate who is so supportive, that they can then move forward very happily as a unit.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. Let's speak about Prince Harry, the other brother. We're hearing that his memoirs, which were, I think, due to come out this autumn, his tell-all memoirs, they might have been delayed, is that right?
Yes, I mean, I wrote Prince Harry's biography a few years ago. I got to know him very well. And I think this time I'm not quite sure whether it's they want to keep it secret, the publisher wants to keep it secret and just put it onto somebody, whether he's had second thoughts, because not just here in United Kingdom, which doesn't matter to him anymore, but in the United States, they're losing their popularity incredibly quickly. And they need the royal titles. So if he's going to do another attack on the royal family and make and reveal things that are really unpleasant, which might not necessarily be true, I think that he can't then expect any sort of warmth from them. And after being married for X years, you start wanting to feel more, and being a father, you know, that the importance of a family. And the book is obviously well written because he used somebody who is very good to write it for him.
Do you know?
I can't remember his name, doesn't I?
American or British?
American. He's won awards for his books. But those names disappear when you're talking.
Don't worry.
I haven't got his name, but he's won awards for it, and he's very, very good. And he's also in line for getting masses of money. I mean, I've heard it's 13 to 14 million. But so for that, he's got to think about something that's really, really important and something he's not said before. And usually that is for something not terribly nice. But I do think, and I think the Jubilee showed that he was quite shocked about how he's so far away from the royal family now, and that they are managing very well, and that William and Catherine are getting on very well with Charles and Camilla, which wasn't always the case. So he might be having thoughts about it, but they need the money. Not necessarily, possibly just for the security that they want.
Angela, thank you ever so much. It's really nice to talk about these pictures. They're all over the front page of the paper today. So there we go.
Yes, now we were speaking about Prince George there being extremely hot yesterday over the weekend at Wimbledon. Are we going to Will Hollis? OK, we are going to Will Hollis. Will Hollis has been... Sorry, let's just get... OK, Will is going to talk to us about the controversy around the country surrounding the circumstances of Boris Johnson's dramatic resignation. He is in Lincolnshire. He's been talking to people out there about it, so we can go to that now.
When the weather gets warm, Brits head to one place. In Sutton-on-Sea, on Lincolnshire's coastline, the summer getaway is starting. But there's one question that can't be escaped, and that's who might become Britain's next Prime Minister.
I think we need somebody that keeps us in Brexit, rather than these anti-Brexit people getting in.
I would like to see Sunak in the job. I think he's very confident, make a good, confident leader.
I don't think I trust anybody, to be honest.
Without the backbiting, without the infighting, let's just hear what each one stands for.
There's plenty with leadership in sight, like Jeremy Hunt, Suella Braverman, and the former Health Secretary Sajid Javid, who was one of the first to jump from Boris's sinking ship.
Actually, I watched his speech, his resignation speech, and I thought it was really good. And I thought from that, I liked him. Yeah, better than the others. And I seem to know more about him, I think, than the rest.
A mile down the beach in Mablethorpe, and there's still one name on many people's lips. The wound of Boris Johnson's removal remains raw for coastal Conservatives here. Their communities have enjoyed tens of millions in levelling up cash, and they felt that Boris Johnson was the way to rebuild Britain's softening seaside.
Well, I think it's been a bit of a sad week, really, for Boris, because he has done a good job. He got us through the pandemic, through Brexit, and now the Ukraine thing, so it has been a bit sad.
He was well liked round here, that we did do, a few mistakes, as you would say, with him, drinking and all the rest of it at the parties and wherever you say. But, yeah, he'll be sadly missed.
It's not good, is it? It's thrown everything into turmoil again, hasn't it? Everybody's just starting to kind of worry about bills coming in and, the economy, and all of a sudden this is happening as well. You don't need it, do you?
But Britain's problems now lie beyond Boris Johnson. By the end of summer, a new Prime Minister will lead the Tory party and the country, but the effect of Boris Johnson, for good or bad, won't easily wash away. Will Hollis for GB News in the East Midlands.
Well, marvellous. OK, now, a little reminder that every Wednesday we hand our show over to you. It is a show full of your ideas and what you want us to talk about, and anything could happen, as you see.
Yes, and we want you to get in touch and tell us what you think the most important stories that you want us to talk about are. We're going to dedicate Wednesday's show entirely to you and the questions you want answering. And you can email in at tothepoint@gbnews.uk. That's the email you need to send those suggestions for our Wednesday show to tothepoint@gbnews.uk, and we will deliver on Wednesday.
We will, and we're going to give you a couple of them now. It's taken us all show to get round to them. It's been a little bit chaotic, as you can imagine. Derek said, congratulations, Mercy. This is on your monologue. I don't give a monkey's bottom what darker shade of pale anyone is who wants the thankless task of Premier, as long as they can do the job properly and finish what I voted for.
While Pauline says, I'm so surprised they're talking to our children about sex work. Let parents talk to their own children about sexual problems. I see nothing was actually said about sexually transmitted diseases. Maybe that's what they need to be teaching. And we have... What do you make of your kids? What have your kids been learning at school? Do you know what they teach about, sex education and all that?
Well, if you're listening on the radio, you just missed my body language, which was an enormous sigh of exasperation. I managed to read between the lines a little bit, but what you'll realise is as your children get older is they don't want to tell you anything, especially when it comes to anything about sex. So if you say, did you have relationships and sex education today? And they say, yes, but shush, mummy, it's so embarrassing, we can't talk about it. And you can be the most open parent in the world, but it's still really difficult to get those conversations off the ground. So the school do have a role to play.
But to teach the very basics and the biological facts and some of the legal, consent, for example.
Consent is important, but frankly, what have the government taught my children about consent over the last 2 years?
Well,
they've taught them that your body is not your own. And if the state tells you to take something that you don't want to take, you still got to take it. So I have a lot of unravelling to do on the message of consent at the moment in my house.
Yes, well, that is very true. I do agree with you. Let's see.
Margaret has said parents teach their children about sex when the age and time is right. Why do schools interfere? It's outrageous what they're teaching at an early age. They do need to fulfil a little bit of a role in that department, Margaret, because, of course, remember, there are some parents who really won't talk to their children about anything, and that's not right either.
Yes, well, that is it from us here at To The Point. Thank you for joining us today. But don't go away. Up next is going to be The Briefing, and we'll be back with you tomorrow.
I'm back at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Don't go anywhere.
Okay. The Briefing with Gloria.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. Heat will be the key feature of the weather this week. We're starting hot and sunny. Temperatures will drop a little through the middle of the week, but the potential for those temperatures to build once more through next weekend. High pressure has been building in for some time. This weather front, though, is going to change things up a little bit, certainly across northern areas over the next 24 hours. For today, though, most places seeing plenty of blue sky. The sunshine may turn a little hazy at times as some high cloud spills in, and that cloud will be thickening across western parts of Scotland during the day. But for most, as I said, it's all about plenty of sunshine and the temperatures. 25, 26 across eastern Scotland, 24 likely in the east of Northern Ireland, but for much of England and Wales, mid to high 20s. 33 is likely somewhere across parts of eastern England. It's going to be a very warm night, especially in eastern England, but we will start to see that weather front bringing cloud and rain to parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. So things changing here, slowly turning a little cooler, but for most it's still a very, very warm night, a difficult night for sleeping. Parts of eastern England may stay above 20 degrees Celsius. That's going to be really quite uncomfortable. On to the details for Tuesday, and a different day for central Scotland, Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud, even a little bit of rain around. That should tend to fizzle out, turning brighter across the far north. A bit more cloud compared to today for England and Wales, but again, another very warm day. Hot across parts of eastern England, 32 Celsius, likely to be the top temperature. But things cooling off a touch across northern Scotland and Northern Ireland. And a freshening breeze, bringing a few showers here during Tuesday evening. Otherwise, things staying fine as we head into Wednesday, but that cold front will be kicking away the heat for a time. So temperatures Wednesday and Thursday still pretty warm and fine in the sunshine. This weather front will bring some rain across the north, but the high builds back and the temperatures could rise again this weekend.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with